What is up, YouTube? Before I get into the video, let me remind you, if you like my content, hit that like and subscribe button. And also, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I don't do all this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Okay, so for my Fallout Commander, I was definitely looking for something that was going to be highly underplayed. There's a lot of really good legends in Fallout. There's going to be quite a few of them, like Mothman and Caesar, that are going to get very overplayed. So I wanted to play something that was a little different. So we're looking at another monocolored deck. We're looking at mono green with Strong the Brutish Thespian. All right. 4 and 2 green for a 7/7 with Ward 2. It is an Enrage. Whenever Strong is dealt damage, you get 3 rad counters and put 3 +1/+1 counters on Strong. And you gain life rather than lose life from radiation. Okay, so we're going to look at creatures. Starting with our Aftermath Analyst. This is 1 and a green for a 1/3. When Aftermath Analyst enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards, and for 3 and a green, you can sacrifice Aftermath Analyst to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Bighorner Rancher for 4 and a green, a 2/5 with Vigilance. You can tap this for an amount of green equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You can also sacrifice this to gain life equal to the greatest toughness among other creatures you control. Birds of Paradise for 1 green, 0/1 with Flying. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Brawn for 3 and a green. This is a 3/3 with Trample. As long as Brawn is in your graveyard and you control a forest, creatures you control have Trample. Elvish Mystic for 1 green. This is a 1/1. You can tap this to add 1 green. Got Endbringer for 5 and a colorless. This is a 5/5. Untap Endbringer during each other player's untap step. You can tap this to have it deal 1 damage to target creature or player. You can pay colorless and tap this to have target creature attack or block this turn. And you can pay 2 colorless and tap this to draw a card. Eternal Witness for 1 and 2 green. This is a 2/1. When Eternal Witness enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Got Evolution Sage for 2 and a green. It's a 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Findhorn Elves for 1 green. It's a 1/1. You can tap it for green. Genesis for 4 and a green. It is a 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 2 and a green. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Glowing One for 2 and a green. This is a 2/2 with Death Touch. Whenever Glowing One deals combat damage to a player, they get 4 rad counters, and whenever a player mills a non-land card, you gain 1 life. Guardian Augmenter for 2 and a green. This is a 2/2 with Flash. Commander creatures you control get +2/+2. Commanders you control have hexproof. Harold and Bob, First Newmans. 2 and a green for a 3/3 with Vigilance and Reach. Whenever Harold and Bob, First Newmans dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with Enchant Forest you control, and Enchanted Forest has tap, add 3 mana of any 1 color. You get 2 rad counters. Harold and Bob loses all other abilities. I'm going to butcher the name of this one, but it's Huatuo? Honored Physician, 1 and 2 green. For a 1/2, you can tap this to put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Activate this ability only during your turn before attackers are declared. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. This costs 10. It is a 12/12. When you cast this spell, draw 4 cards. It has Annihilator 4. When Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library. Llanowar Elves for 1 green. This is a 1/1. You can tap to add green. Ramunap Excavator for 2 and a green. This is a 2/3. You may play land cards from your graveyard. Sakura Tribe Elder, 1 and a green for a 1/1. You can sacrifice this to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Tato Farmer for 2 and a green. It's a 1/4 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may get 2 rad counters. You can also tap this to put target land card in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control tapped. Timeless Witness for 2 and 2 green. This is a 2/1. When Timeless Witness enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand, and you can eternalize this for 5 and 2 green. Ulvenwald Tracker for 1 green. It's a 1/1. You can pay 1 and a green and tap this to have target creature you control fight another target creature. World Shaper for 3 and a green. It's a 3/3. Whenever World Shaper attacks, you may mill 3 cards, and when World Shaper dies, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Alright, next up is going to be instants. Starting with Ancient Animus for 1 and a green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. If it's legendary, then it fights target creature an opponent controls. Beast Within for 2 and a green. Destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green beast creature token. Heroic Intervention for 1 and a green. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Inscription of Abundance for 1 and a green. It has kicker for 2 and a green. Choose 1. If the spell was cast, choose any number instead. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Colony Ambush for 2 and a green. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Croson Grip for 2 and a green. Split second. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Mutant's Prey for 1 green. Target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it fights target creature an opponent controls. Prize Fight for 1 and a green. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Create a treasure token. Return of the Wild Speaker for 4 and a green. Choose 1. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. Tail Swipe for 1 green. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast this spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Then those creatures fight each other. Titanic Brawl for 1 and a green. The spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Okay, next up is sorceries. Bolliged Recovery for 2 and a green. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Bushwhack for 1 green. Choose 1. Search your library for a basic land card. Reveal it, put into your hand, then shuffle. Or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Cultivate for 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand, then shuffle. Curse the Werefox for 2 and a green. Create a monster roll token attached to target creature you control. When you do, that creature fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Ents Fury for 1 and a green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control if its power is 4 or greater. Then that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn and fights target creature you don't control. Kodama's Reach for 2 and a green. Search the library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. Nature's Lore for 1 and a green. Search your library for a forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Prey Upon for 1 green. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Rampant Growth for 1 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Skyshroud Claim for 3 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 forest cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Smell Fear for 1 and a green. Proliferate. Target creature you control fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Splendid Reclamation for 3 and a green. Return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. 3 Visits for 1 and a green. Search your library for a forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And Unnatural Restoration for 1 and a green. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and proliferate. Okay, next up is Artifacts. Okay, starting with Arcane Signet for 2. You can tap this to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Bone Sabers for 2 and a green. Whenever equipped creature attacks, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Equips for 3. Conduit of Worlds for 2 and a green. 2 and 2 green. You may play lands from your graveyard. You can also tap this and choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Crucible of Worlds, cost 3. You may play lands from your graveyard. Elixir of Immortality for 1. You can pay 2 and tap this to gain 5 life. Shuffle Elixir of Immortality and your graveyard into their owner's library. Emerald Medallion for 2. Green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Mithril Coat for 3. This has Flash, Indestructible, and when Mithril Coat enters the battlefield, attach it to target legendary creature you control. Equipped creature has Indestructible. Equips for 3. Power Fist for 1 and a green. Equipped creature has Trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Equips for 2. Soul Ring for 1. Tap it for 2 colorless. Swiftfoot Boots cost 2. Equipped creature has Hexproof and Haste, and equips for 1. Alright, next up is enchantments. We got Branching Evolution for 2 and a green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. Cartouche of Strength for 2 and a green. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Strength enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature an opponent controls. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Trample. Garruk's Uprising for 2 and a green. When Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have Trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Guardian Project for 3 and a green. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. Hardened Scales for 1 green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. The Mending of Dominaria for 3 and 2 green. The first 2 chapters are mill 2 cards, then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and the final chapter is return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Okay, next up is non-basic lands. Starting with Arcane Lighthouse. This taps for colorless, and you can pay 1 and tap it until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud and cannot have Hexproof or Shroud. Got Arena. You can pay 3 and tap this and tap target creature you control and target creature an opponent control of an opponent's choice he or she controls. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power to each other. What a weirdly written card. Castle Garenbrig. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. Taps for green. You can pay 2 and 2 green and tap this to add 6 mana, 6 green to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. Command Beacon. You can tap this for colorless, or you can tap and sacrifice this to put your commander into your hand from the command zone. Detection Tower. You can tap this for colorless, or you can tap 1 and tap this until end of turn. Your opponent's creatures Your opponents and creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be the targets of spells and abilities you control, as though they didn't have hexproof. Karn's Bastion. You can tap this for colorless, and you can pay 4 and tap this to proliferate. Mariposa Military Base. You may have Mariposa Military Base enter the battlefield tapped. If you do, you get 2 rad counters. You can tap this for colorless, or you can pay 5 and tap this to draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each rad counter you have. Myriad Landscape enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap this for colorless. You can also pay 2 and tap this to sacrifice Myriad Landscape to search your library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Rogue's Passage taps for colorless. You can pay 4 and tap this to have target creature become unblockable until end turn. Tyrite Sanctum taps for colorless. You can also pay 2 and tap this to have target legendary creature become a god in addition to its other types. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can also pay 4 and tap and sacrifice this to put an indestructible counter on target god. And then finally we have War Room. Taps for colorless. You can also pay 3 and tap this to pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. And then lastly, we're going to look at basic lands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. 25 forests. Okay, so that is the strong Brutish Thespian deck tech. Essentially, there's a strong self-mill in here with rad counters, ton of different things that do self-mill, a lot of ways to get the lands that you mill back from your graveyard into play. Brutish Thespian helps with rad counter damage, converting it into life as opposed to life loss. Really, the main purpose here is to utilize Strong's ability to, well, his Enrage ability via fight spells and using things like Arcane Lighthouse and the other one that I can't remember to remove hexproof from your opponent's creatures so that they can be targeted, and then just beat them silly until Strong gets so big and has trample so that he can just run through and deal commander damage to destroy your opponents. This deck is absolutely awful, but it was fun to build, and it's fun to play. The problem is it's pretty much Voltron, and once your opponents realize what the heck you're doing, they're going to do everything they can to stop you. There's a lot of ways in here, because it's very easy to mill yourself out, there's a lot of ways in here to shuffle your graveyard back into your library so you can keep doing what you're doing. Via things like the Elixir or Immortality or the Kozilek or the Mending of Dominaria. And also, Kozilek is a good backup strategy if things get kind of dicey and you have the lands, which you should, because there's a lot of ways to get lands back into play. So anyway, that is Strong the Brutish Thespian. If you have any comments or questions, leave those down below. But keep it positive. I will remove negative comments. And until next time, guys. Peace.